Have you ever walked into a casino? Maybe not, but just imagine it for a second.
The first thing you notice isn't the sound, it's the lights. They're not just bright, they're hypnotic. Neon glows that seem to whisper, "Come closer," lights that blink just the right way to keep your eyes busy, while your brain slowly forgets about time. Now the sounds kick in. The clinks, the dings, the faint cheer from someone winning or pretending to win. There's music somewhere, but it's designed to blend into the walls. The real rhythm of this place comes from chips clacking, cards shuffling, and machines whirring. No windows, no clocks, no exits in sight. That's not an accident. The air smells clean, but almost too clean. It's pumped with just enough oxygen to keep your brain alert, but not quite skeptical. And then there are the carpets. Swirly, loud, busy patterns. Why? To hide chips if they fall. Casinos don't want you finding a single coin you didn't earn. Every inch of a casino is designed by experts, not in art or design, but in mathematics. It's the quietest chaos you'll ever experience. A carefully engineered machine built not to take your money outright, but to make you feel like you're about to win it back. This isn't just architecture. This is psychological warfare, and math is the general behind the curtain. Casinos, in many ways, are giant math problems. Problems designed so most people never solve them. But some try. Now let's be clear. This video isn't about encouraging you to gamble. In fact, it might do the opposite. Because once you really understand what's going on, once you see the numbers behind the curtain, gambling becomes a little like watching a magic trick after you've seen how it's done. Still fun, still dramatic, but no longer quite so magical. Still, it's fascinating, because gambling isn't just about money. It's about risk, chance, belief. It's about how our brains interact with probability, and how, very often, our brains lose that battle. Humans are terrible at randomness. We look for patterns in everything. We see faces in toast. We think flipping heads 5 times in a row means tails has to be next. And casinos? They know that. They depend on it. But that's not the whole story. Because every now and then, someone looks past the noise, past the blinking lights and the weird carpets, past the near wins and the shiny jackpots. Someone starts to see the pattern behind the illusion. And that's where this story begins. This story isn't just about math. It's about rebels, nerds with calculators and guts, people who walked into the most mathematically fortified buildings in the world and won. Not by cheating, not by trickery, but by understanding how the system worked and using math to turn the odds in their favor, even if only slightly. The casinos? They didn't love that. You'll meet some of these people. A team of students who turned blackjack into a science experiment, a man who watched a roulette wheel like it was a nature documentary, and others who found tiny cracks in games built to be unbreakable. But before we dive into that, we need to understand what they were up against. We need to step into the shoes of a regular casino visitor, wide-eyed, hopeful, and statistically doomed. Because casinos don't need to trick you. That would be illegal, and not very elegant. No, they just let the math do its job, slowly, relentlessly, one chip at a time. You see, every casino game is built around a beautiful little concept called expected value. It's the average amount you'll win or lose over time. And in almost every game, the expected value is negative for you and positive for the house. The house always wins, not because it cheats, but because it doesn't have to. But people still come. They come for the thrill, the atmosphere, the possibility, no matter how slim, of beating the odds. And honestly, we don't blame them. Casinos are fun, at least until your wallet starts to feel light and your brain starts doing mental gymnastics to justify one last round. So tonight, or this morning, or whenever you're listening, we're going to gently guide you through the glittering world of casino math. No pressure, no pop quizzes, just stories, ideas, and maybe a few surprises. We'll explore why some games are more beatable than others, why blackjack is the only table game that mathematicians get a little too excited about, why some slot machines practically whisper lies into your ears, and how a bunch of nerds once walked into Vegas and left with millions. You'll hear about mistakes too, brilliant minds that got greedy, people who thought they could outmath the house and ended up in handcuffs, or worse, banned from the buffet. And as always, we'll keep things light. You won't need to solve equations, you won't even need to stay awake the whole time. In fact, the longer you listen, the more we hope you'll start to drift. This isn't school, this is bedtime math for grown-up kids who never lost their sense of wonder. So sit back. The carpet is loud, the lights are blinking, the chips are stacked, and somewhere far off in the corner of your imagination, a roulette ball starts to spin. Let's take a slow walk through the numbers and meet the trick that casinos really don't want you to know. So let's talk about a phrase you've probably heard before: the house always wins. It's one of those sayings that sounds obvious, right? Like water is wet or don't eat yellow snow. But what does it really mean? Does the casino always win? Like, always. Even if someone wins $1 million at a slot machine? Yes. And also, not exactly. Let's slow it down. Casinos aren't in the business of winning one bet. They're in the business of letting you win just enough to keep you coming back, while they quietly scoop up the profits in the background, like a silent vacuum cleaner with gold trim. The magic happens in the math. Every game you play at a casino has something called a house edge. That's the built-in advantage the casino has over the player. It might be small, like 1 or 2%, sometimes even less. But over hundreds or thousands or millions of plays, that small edge adds up. Let's say you sit down at a blackjack table and you play 100 hands. You win some, you lose some. Maybe you're up, maybe you're down, but behind the scenes, if you're playing like most people guessing, maybe a bit of guessing with confidence, the casino knows it'll make about 2 cents for every dollar you bet. Maybe more. That's the house edge at work. It's like flipping a slightly weighted coin, one that only favors the house just a tiny bit more than you. You wouldn't notice it at first. You might even think you're lucky. But flip it enough times, and the house edge always wins. Now here's the sneaky part. Casinos don't need to win every hand. That's the trap. They want you to win sometimes. If you lost every time, you'd leave. You'd tell your friends it was rigged. You'd go home and watch cat videos. So instead, they let you win just enough to keep your hopes up. Maybe your first spin hits a small jackpot. Maybe you double your money in the first hour. You feel smart. You feel in control. You feel due for something big. But over time, the edge does its thing. Slowly, patiently, like a friendly robot that never gets tired and never makes mistakes. Let's take roulette, for example. Simple game. Red or black. Right. Not quite. A standard American roulette wheel has 38 slots, numbers 1 through 36, plus a 0 and a 00. If it were truly a 50-50 game between red and black, it'd be fair, but the 0 and 00 are green. They don't belong to red or black. So when you bet on red, you're not actually betting on a 50% chance. You're betting on 18 out of 38. That's that tiny difference. That's the house edge. It's about 5.26% for American roulette. And over time, it guarantees the house will come out ahead. Now let's pause for a second. Because if the math is so against you, why do people keep playing? Well, for one, it's exciting. Humans love risk. Our brains light up when we almost win. That's actually a studied phenomenon. Near misses trigger the same part of your brain as actual wins. Casinos know this. It's science, but with glitter. There's also the illusion of control. When you roll the dice yourself or press the spin button, you feel involved. It feels like your choice matters. But in most games, it really doesn't. Not in the long run. The house edge doesn't care about your lucky socks or your system. or the time you almost won last weekend. But here's where it gets interesting. Because even though the house usually wins, every once in a while, someone flips the script. Someone finds a crack in the system. A tiny mathematical loophole. A statistical pattern. A game where the house edge can actually be reversed. That's what this whole story is about. You see, the house edge is a very powerful thing. But it's not magic. It's math. And math, real math, doesn't care who owns the building or how many chandeliers they have. Math is fair. It works for anyone who understands it. Even if you're just a broke college student with a brain full of probabilities and a cheap pair of sunglasses. And blackjack has a secret. It's one of the only games in the casino where your choices actually do matter. You can reduce the house edge. You can even flip it in your favor. Not easily, not forever, but just enough to make the casinos very, very nervous. We'll get to that soon, but before we do, let's take a moment to appreciate the elegance of casino design. Not just the carpets and the lighting, but the deeper design, the math, the way every game has been fine-tuned to feel exciting, unpredictable, fair, while always being just a little unfair. It's brilliant, really. A mathematical masterpiece. And like any good masterpiece, it hides its technique behind illusion. That's the thing casinos really don't want you to know. Not the card counting trick. Not the secret strategy. Just this. That everything you're seeing, the wheel, the cards, the blinking machines, is running on math. Cold, quiet, relentless math. The kind that doesn't sleep and doesn't forget. But now that you know that, you're already seeing the game a little differently. Next, we'll dig into how your brain reacts to chance. How the flashing lights and sounds can make you believe in luck that doesn't exist. And how understanding the psychology of losing might just help you win something more important than money. Let's talk about something very strange. Something that makes casinos billions of dollars every year. And no, it's not the game. It's your brain. Not just your brain, of course. Mine too. Everyone's. We're all running on the same buggy software when it comes to randomness. And casinos? They've been debugging us for decades. Here's a fun fact. Your brain hates randomness. Like, truly despises it. It wants patterns, craves patterns, even where there are none. It's the same reason we see shapes in clouds or faces in electrical outlets. It's called apophenia. The human tendency to find meaningful patterns in meaningless noise. Now put that in a casino. Add some spinning lights, cheerful music, and the occasional jackpot. Mix it with oxygen-pumped air and free drinks. You get an environment where your brain starts doing very silly things. Take slot machines. Most people know that slot machines are random. But when you get 2 cherries and then just barely miss a third, your brain lights up as if you almost won. It feels like you were close. Like the machine wanted you to win. Like if you spin just once more, it might actually happen. But here's the trick. Slot machines are designed to do that. They are literally programmed to produce near misses. Not too many. Just enough to keep your dopamine levels gently simmering. That almost win feeling? It's a feature, not a bug. Your brain says, I'm getting closer. The machine says, you're not. The casino says, thanks for playing. And that's just the start. Let's talk about the gambler's fallacy. It goes like this. You flip a coin and it lands on heads 5 times in a row. You think it has to be tails next. It's due, right? Nope. The coin has no memory. Each flip is independent. But your brain? Oh, it believes in fairness. It believes in balance. It thinks the universe keeps score. Casinos love that. Because it means you might chase your losses. You might keep playing, thinking a win is coming any minute now. You'll convince yourself that the machine owes you. That fate is bending in your favor. It's not. The universe isn't watching, and the slot machine is just following code. But your brain is doing mental gymnastics. It's not thinking in probability. It's thinking in stories, and casinos are very good at feeding you stories. Here's another fun psychological twist. Loss aversion. Losing hurts more than winning feels good. That's not an opinion. That's been studied. We feel the pain of a loss about twice as strongly as the joy of a win. So what do? We chase. We try to erase the loss. We double down. We tell ourselves we're evening the score. But the more we chase, the deeper we go. And the house edge keeps smiling quietly in the background. Casinos even use time against you. No clocks, no windows. Ever notice that? It's because your sense of time is tied to your environment. No sunlight, no idea how long you've been playing, and the longer you play, the more likely the house edge kicks in. There's also something called the illusion of control. In games like craps, players roll the dice themselves. People actually believe they have a better chance of winning if they roll instead of the dealer. Some even roll harder when they want high numbers and softer when they want low ones. Spoiler, it doesn't help. But it feels like it does. And feeling in control is addictive. It gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Ever heard of variable reward schedules? It's a fancy term from behavioral psychology. Basically, it means you get rewards at unpredictable intervals. Not every time, not never. Just enough to keep you guessing. This is the same technique used in dog training, social media notifications, and of course gambling. It's the most effective way to condition a response. A rat presses a lever and gets food, but not every time. Just sometimes. The rat keeps pressing. Humans are the same. That random jackpot, that occasional win, that's the liver. And we just keep pressing. Here's a weird one. People actually prefer games where they lose a little, win a little, and hover near even more than games where they just lose steadily. Because the ups and downs keep things exciting. It feels like you're close. It's the same trick used in video games. Small wins to keep you playing. So when you think about it, casinos aren't really selling money. They're selling hope, suspense, almost. They're selling a story and your brain, poor thing, is just dying to believe it. Now don't feel bad. These psychological effects happen to everyone. Even people who understand the math. Even people who design the games. Our brains are wired for survival, not statistics. But once you become aware of it, once you know the playbook, it becomes easier to see through the illusion. You start to notice how the slot machine celebrates small wins with dramatic music, even if you've just lost more than you started with. You start to recognize the gambler's fallacy in your own thoughts. You start to pause, and that pause, that tiny moment of clarity, that's power. Math isn't just about numbers. It's about understanding systems. And the casino is a system. A glittery, seductive, beautifully constructed one, but still a system. And systems can be studied, understood, even gently resisted. So next time someone tells you they have a lucky machine, smile, let them believe. But you'll know that the machine doesn't remember them. It doesn't care. It's just numbers, randomness wrapped in sound effects. And knowing that, well, that's step one in beating the game. Coming up next, Blackjack. The one game where your decisions actually do matter, where math can give you a tiny edge, and where a group of math students once turned the tables on the entire casino industry. Let's take a closer look.
All right, time to roll up our sleeves. Or maybe just adjust the blanket you're wrapped in.
Let's talk about Blackjack, also known as 21. Also known as the only casino game that makes mathematicians go, huh, that's interesting. Because while most games in a casino are based on pure luck, throw the dice, spin the wheel, hope for the best, Blackjack is different. Here, your decisions actually matter, not just emotionally, mathematically. And that's a big deal. Blackjack is simple on the surface. You get 2 cards. Try to get as close to 21 as possible without going over. Face cards are worth 10. Aces can be 1 or 11. You play against the dealer, not the other players. But the beauty of Blackjack, and the reason math nerds love it, is that it's not random in the same way slots or roulette are. Because in blackjack, the cards don't reset after every hand. They come from a deck, or usually several decks shuffled together, but still a finite set of cards. And once a card is played, it's gone. At least until the next reshuffle. That, my sleepy friend, is where the magic starts. Because now we have something beautiful. Dependent probability. Let's say a bunch of high cards have been played in the last few hands. Kings, queens, aces. Well, now the deck is a little bit lighter on high cards. The next hand, probably less exciting. But if lots of low cards have been played, twos, threes, little guys, then the deck is rich in face cards. And that's when things start to shift in your favour. See where this is going? This is the crack in the system. And this is what card counters look for. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little more about the basic strategy. Because yes, there is a mathematically correct way to play blackjack. For every possible hand you can be dealt, and every possible dealer up card, there is an optimal move. Hit, stand, double, split. Whatever it is, the math has already figured it out. This strategy doesn't guarantee you'll win every hand. Far from it. But it does minimize your losses over time. Instead of giving the house a 2% edge, you cut it down to around a 0.5%. That's like turning a mountain into a speed bump. And if you also keep track of which cards have been played, that's when things start to tilt in your direction. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's just appreciate how rare this is. Most casino games don't let you make decisions that matter. In roulette, once you place your bet, the wheel does the rest. In slots, you hit the button and hope. In craps, well, okay, craps is chaos. But in blackjack, you are in control. And that's kind of dangerous because it feels winnable. It feels like you're being smart, which is exactly what keeps people coming back. And for a long time, the casinos were fine with that. Because even with good strategy, the average player still loses. Maybe more slowly, but still. Then the mathematicians showed up. People started running simulations, writing down probabilities, creating strategy cards. In the 1960s, a guy named Edward Thorpe, a math professor with a mind like a calculator, published a book called Beat the Dealer, and suddenly, everything changed.
Thorpe didn't invent card counting, but he made it famous. And more importantly, he made it sound cool. He showed that by tracking the ratio of high cards to low cards left in the deck, you could figure out when the odds were in your favor and bet big when it mattered.
It wasn't gambling, it was strategy. Boring, beautiful, spreadsheet-worthy strategy. And yes, it worked. Card counting, when done right, doesn't guarantee you'll win every time. But over hundreds or thousands of hands, it can flip the house edge into your edge. Not by much, maybe 1%, maybe 2%. But that's enough, especially if you're betting big only when the odds are on your side. To casinos, this was like someone hacking their slot machines. They were not pleased. But here's the thing, card counting isn't illegal. You're just thinking, using your brain, remembering stuff. And last time I checked, thinking in public wasn't a crime. But that didn't stop casinos from cracking down hard. We'll get to that in a later chapter. Trust me, there are disguises involved. But for now, just know that blackjack became a battlefield. Math versus money. Strategy versus spectacle. And in the middle of it all, a group of college students started to take things to the next level. But more on them soon. For now, let's zoom out. Blackjack is unique in the casino world. Because it's interactive, the deck evolves, the decisions matter, and the odds can shift, ever so slightly in your favour. It's the mathematician's playground, the probability student's roller coaster, the only place in the casino where you're allowed to think and win, at least for a little while. But here's the real beauty of it. You don't even have to play blackjack to appreciate it. You can just admire it from a distance, like a well-built puzzle. A living math problem wrapped in bright lights and fake felt. And maybe, just maybe, Knowing how it works makes it easier to walk away. Because when you understand the math, you don't chase, you don't panic, you don't believe in due cards or lucky tables.
You just see the game for what it is. Numbers, chance, and tiny edges.
And that's the theme of this whole journey. Tiny edges, quiet math, and the people who notice. Coming up next, we dive deep into what the house edge actually is, how it's calculated and how it's quietly built into every hand, every game, every spin. Don't worry, it'll be gentle, and maybe even funny. Let's go find the edge. Let's talk about the most important concept in the casino world. No, it's not luck. It's not chips. It's not even the cocktail waitresses carrying suspiciously weak pina coladas. It's the house edge. Sounds kind of boring, right? House edge, like the name of a mediocre indie band. But don't be fooled. This is the silent engine that powers the entire casino industry. It's invisible, it's sneaky, and it's mathematically beautiful. Let's break it down in the gentlest, sleepiest way possible. The house edge is the average amount of money the casino expects to win from you over time, based on how much you bet. It's usually expressed as a percentage. If a game has a house edge of 5%, and you bet $100, then on average the casino will earn $5 from you. Over time, not every hand, not every spin, but across 1 million bets, that edge adds up like a slow, sneaky tax. And here's the important part. The house doesn't need to win big to stay rich. It just needs to win consistently. Let's try a super simple example. Imagine a game where you flip a coin. Heads, you win 1 pollard. Tails, you lose 1. That sounds fair. 50-50, perfect balance. But what if the game changed just a little? Let's say if you win, you still get $1. But if you lose, it's such a tiny difference. 5 cents. Would you notice it? Maybe not right away, but the casino would. That 5-cent gap is the house edge. It's not trying to rob you. It's trying to drip its way into profit. And it works. Let's go back to blackjack for a second. If you play without any strategy, just vibes and wishful thinking, the house edge might be around 2%. Not terrible, but still against you. If you play perfect strategy, the kind some people memorize with flashcards and small tears in their soul, you can bring that edge down to about. That's impressive, but even then, the casino still has the advantage. And remember, they have time. They have chairs. You're the one getting tired. Now compare that to other games. Roulette, American roulette, has a house edge of craps. Depends on the bet. Some bets are decent. Others are like throwing money into a volcano and hoping for gold. Slot machines? Oh boy, those can have house edges anywhere from 2% to 10%, or even more. And you never really know. That's the secret sauce. Some games don't even show their math. They just light up and go ding ding ding, and play music from the future. And we fall for it, because it feels like winning. But the house edge doesn't care how you feel. It's math. It doesn't blink. It doesn't cheer. It doesn't care if you're wearing your lucky socks or sitting in your hot seat. It just runs quietly in the background, turning your bets into slightly smaller piles. And you know what? That's fine. Casinos are businesses. They have fountains to fill and carpets to replace. The edge is their business model. And to be honest, it's kind of genius. The house edge is invisible loyalty. You don't have to subscribe. You just have to play. And every time you do, a little slice goes back to the house. But here's where things get interesting. Because not every edge is obvious. And sometimes, in rare cases, the edge can actually flip. Just a little. And for just a moment, that's when the math rebels step in. The blackjack counters, the roulette analysts, the people who treat casinos like physics labs, they look for games where the edge is either very small or very broken. You see, the house edge is only unbeatable if the game is designed perfectly. But humans make games. And sometimes, humans mess up. Sometimes a wheel is slightly biased. Sometimes a slot machine glitches. Sometimes a lottery system gets a little too generous. And math nerds, they love those moments. There's a story, we'll get to it later, of a group that found a flaw in a state lottery and made millions legally, just by playing when the math was in their favor. But that's rare. Most of the time, the house edge stands strong. Even in games that feel fair, the edge is baked in. Take roulette. You bet on red or black. Seems like a coin toss, but remember those pesky green pockets. The 0 and 0, they don't belong to red or black. They're just there quietly sabotaging your odds. You're not betting on a 50% chance. You're betting on 18 out of 38. That's 47.37%. And that little gap, that's the edge. That's the tax. That's the game. And here's something even sneakier. Many casino games offer bad bets disguised as fun bets. In craps, for example, there are bets on the table that look exciting, but have a house edge of over 10%. That's basically daylight robbery in math form. Casinos know we love excitement, and higher risk bets feel exciting, but they come with a cost. So now you know. The house edge is the quiet villain in every casino story. It's not flashy, it's not loud, it doesn't need to be. It just sits in the corner, sipping your money one tiny sip at a time. But now that you see it, now that you know how it works, you've already got an edge of your own, because awareness is power. Even if you never play a hand or spin a wheel, understanding the math makes you the smartest person in the room, and in a casino that's worth more than chips. Next up, we meet the ultimate math rebels. A group of students who walked into Vegas with notebooks and left with stacks of cash. Let's meet the MIT Blackjack Team. Let's take a moment to picture the ultimate casino heist team. Cool, stylish, dressed in tuxedos, speaking 5 languages, probably sipping something expensive. Now forget all of that, because the real team that beat the casinos wasn't made of ex-spies or martial artists. They were math students. From MIT. Yep, actual college kids. Some of them barely old enough to rent a car. All of them extremely comfortable around numbers. None of them particularly intimidating, unless you're afraid of spreadsheets. They didn't carry weapons. They carried notebooks. They didn't use fake IDs to scam people. They used them to sneak back into casinos after getting kicked out. And somehow, they made millions. This was the MIT Blackjack Team. It all started in the late 1970s, but it really took off in the 80s and 90s. A small group of students, engineers and alumni started gathering in dorm rooms, basements, and rented apartments, not for poker night, but for blackjack simulations. They weren't gamblers. They were planners. Think whiteboards, stats, probability charts, even practice tables with fake dealers. It looked less like a casino, and more like someone was studying for a midterm. Which, to be fair, they kind of were. But instead of preparing for finals, they were preparing to take on Las Vegas. Their secret? Card counting. They trained for it like it was a sport. 'Cause in a way, it was. Timing, memory, precision, discipline. If someone messed up even slightly, it could ruin everything. So they practiced a lot. They learnt to count cards using the high-low system, which we'll go over in the next chapter, so don't worry if you're not sure how it works yet. What matters here is that they didn't just count cards, they built teams around it. See, card counting is hard enough on your own, but casinos are watching. They're paranoid. If you start winning big and changing your bets at the right moments, they'll notice, and then you'll get the talk, or worse, the security escort. So the MIT team came up with a better way. They created roles. You had spotters, who played small, low-stakes hands while counting the cards silently. Their job was to signal when the count was favourable, meaning lots of high cards left in the deck. Then came the big players, or BPs. These were the heavy hitters. They'd casually walk in, pretending they'd just arrived, and sit down right when the count was hot. Boom, big bets. Cool confidence. just in time to win. The key? The casino didn't know the spotter and the BP were working together. The spotter looked like a regular tourist. The BP looked like a lucky gambler. Together, they were math ninjas. And then there was the gorilla. Yes, the gorilla. That's the term for a big bettor who doesn't need to count cards at all. They just wander around the casino, looking aimless, until a spotter signals them in. They bet big when told to, win, and walk away looking confused and rich. It's brilliant. And they used all kinds of signals. Chips placed in a certain way. Hand gestures. Phrases like, the cake is ready, which to a dealer sounds like nonsense, but to the team meant, hey, jump in now, the deck is full of face cards. They even wore disguises. Wigs. Glasses. Hats. Some had fake IDs. Some grew mustaches. It was like a low-budget spy movie starring math majors. But it worked. The team raked in millions. They played in Vegas, Atlantic City, the Bahamas, even Europe. They formed legit business partnerships to handle the money. Investors funded their bankrolls in exchange for a cut of the profits. It became a full-on operation. Students were recruited, trained, promoted. It was blackjack meets startup culture. But, as with all great stories, success brought attention. Casinos started catching on. They noticed the same faces showing up, winning big and then disappearing for months. Security got tighter. Surveillance got smarter. Eventually the team started getting spotted and banned. Some players were politely asked to leave. Others were followed, photographed and blacklisted. And once your face is in the system, it's hard to sneak back in, even with a wig. By the early 2000s, the golden age was fading. The MIT Blackjack Team eventually dissolved. Some players moved on to normal lives. Others wrote books, gave interviews, even inspired movies, like 21, which was very loosely based on their adventures. And by loosely, we mean very, very loosely. But their legacy, still legendary. Because here's the thing. They didn't cheat. They didn't hack the system. They just understood the math better than anyone else. And they used that knowledge carefully, methodically, to turn the tables. Casinos weren't mad because the game was broken. They were mad because it was being played perfectly. And perfect play is not what casinos are built for. They're built for emotion, impulse, bad decisions and good stories. But the MIT team wasn't there for stories. They were there for stats. And they proved something important. That even in the most rigged environments in buildings literally designed to make you lose, understanding the numbers can still give you power, even if you wear a terrible wig while doing it. So, if you're still awake, congratulations, you've just met the people who beat the house. The real ones. No secret hacks. No lucky charms. Just math, memory, and a lot of teamwork. Next up, we'll talk about what exactly they were doing, step by step. Yes, we're going to count cards together, gently, calmly, and with absolutely zero pressure. Because let's be honest, card counting sounds kind of scary, but it's actually kind of simple, and we'll do it without even leaving our blanket. Okay, so let's get one thing straight. Card counting is not illegal. You're not breaking any laws. You're not going to jail. You don't need a getaway car. You're literally just doing math in your head. But here's the fun part. Casinos hate it. Hate it like cats hate bathtubs. Hate it like kids hate pop quizzes. Hate it with the cold, glittery passion of a building that doesn't enjoy losing money. Because while you're not breaking the law, you are breaking the illusion. The illusion that everyone's playing a fair, exciting, unpredictable game. A game the house is guaranteed to win over time. And when someone comes in and starts beating that system using nothing but math and memory, well, casinos take that very personally. But let's pause. Why isn't card counting illegal? Well, it's simple. You're just remembering things. Tracking which cards have been played, using that knowledge to decide how much to bet. There's no cheating. You're not marking cards or hacking machines or bribing the dealer with gift cards to Olive Garden. You're sitting quietly, thinking, and last time I checked, thinking is still legal. Even in Vegas, the courts agree. In fact, there have been cases where card counters sued casinos for banning them. Sometimes the casinos won, sometimes the counters won. But legally, card counting is not considered cheating, it's just unwelcome. They imagine owning a pizza shop. You tell customers, hey, come eat as much as you want for $10, but then one person shows up every day with a calculator and a scale, and they figure out how to get 3 times as much food as anyone else. They're not breaking the rules, but eventually you'd be like, yeah, maybe don't come back. That's how casinos see card counters. It's not criminal. It's just inconvenient. So what do casinos do? Oh, they get creative. If they suspect you're counting cards, you might get a friendly visit from the pit boss. He'll ask how you're doing, comment on your betting, maybe even compliment your shirt, even if it's a terrible shirt. Then they might shuffle the deck early, or ask you to stop playing blackjack, or in some cases escort you out with a smile that says, never come back, math boy. If you keep pushing your luck, they'll escalate. They'll take your photo, share it with other casinos, add you to the Griffin Book, a legendary industry blacklist that's basically Facebook for card counters, but with fewer birthday reminders. Some casinos use facial recognition software. Others track player behavior electronically. If you sit down and suddenly start winning in weird patterns, they'll notice. And if you're too good, too consistent, or just a little too calm, they might label you a threat. One of the MIT team members once described it like this. It's like being a spy, but the only secret weapon you have is algebra. There are stories, true ones, of players wearing disguises. Fake mustaches, wigs, coloured contacts. One guy even came back in a wheelchair just to avoid detection. It worked. Until it didn't, because here's the truth. The casino doesn't have to prove anything. They're private businesses. If they think you're counting, they don't need a trial. They can just tell you to leave, or in classic casino style, suggest that you leave. It's not personal, it's business. But let's not make casinos the villain here. They're protecting their model. And from their point of view, card counting is kind of like exploiting a loophole. It's legal, but annoying. And honestly, most players will never count cards successfully. It takes discipline, focus, calm. You can't drink. You can't get distracted. You have to keep a running count in your head while holding a conversation with a dealer and pretending to be casual. You have to lose sometimes without reacting. You have to win without celebrating. You have to make card counting look like dumb luck. Which, let's be honest, is not easy. Especially when your brain is screaming, we did the math and it worked. So casinos don't need to catch everyone. They just need to make it uncomfortable enough that most people give up. That's why teams like the MIT crew used rotating players, changing outfits, and coded signals. One person alone is easier to track, but a whole team, moving like a weird nerdy organism, that's harder. Of course, once you've been spotted or backed off, as they say, you're probably done at that casino. Some players wear hats. Some grow facial hair. Some change their names legally. There's a whole subculture around staying in the game. But here's the poetic twist. The better you are at counting, the less you look like someone who's winning. You're not playing big hands all the time. You're waiting, watching, betting small for ages. Then suddenly, when the count swings, you bet big. And to the untrained eye, that looks like someone just got lucky. Which is exactly the point. So, is it worth it? That's up to you. Some people love the thrill, the challenge, the sense that they're outsmarting a billion-dollar system with nothing but math and mild social anxiety. Others just want to enjoy a few hands, lose a few chips, and grab some crab legs. No judgment either way, but the truth is, casinos don't fear people playing badly. They fear the rare, patient few who know exactly what they're doing and are quiet enough to get away with it. And now that you understand why card counting is unwanted, but not illegal, you're ready to learn how it's done. That's right. Next chapter will walk you through the basics. Slowly, sleepily. You won't need flashcards or formulas, just a calm brain and maybe a snack. Because the only thing more satisfying than beating a casino is understanding how it could be done. From the comfort of your blanket, let's count, alright? It's time. Let's learn how to count cards. But don't worry, you don't need a photographic memory. You don't need to be good at math. You don't even need to sit up straight. You can do this fully horizontal. Because at its core, card counting is just counting. And if you've ever counted sheep or stairs or leftover pizza slices, you're qualified. Let's start with the basics. The most common method is called the high-low system. It's not the only system, but it's the most famous, the easiest to learn, and the most likely to work when you're also pretending to sip a watered-down mojito in a casino. Here's how it works. Every card in the deck gets assigned a value. Not its face value, a counting value. And it's super simple. 2 through 6, you count as 7 through 9. You count as 10, Jack, Queen, King, Ace. You count as... That's it. You start at 0. And every time a card is played, to you, to the dealer, to other players, you update your count. If you see a 2, you go up by 1. If you see a Queen, you go down by 1. If it's a 7, ignore it. 0. And you just keep going. So why does this work? Well, blackjack favours the player when there are more high cards, 10s and aces left in the deck, because high cards increase your chances of getting a blackjack, and blackjack pays more than a regular win. Also, high cards make the dealer more likely to bust. So, if the count is high, meaning more low cards have been played, then the deck is full of juicy high cards, and it's time to bet big. If the count is low, meaning lots of high cards are already gone, then the deck is stacked against you. Bet small, or just sip your drink and wait. The goal is simple. Bet more when the count is in your favour. Bet less when it's not. That's the whole game. Now, let's say you're halfway through a deck, and the count is... Does that mean you have an edge? Maybe. But it depends on how many cards are left. But that's where we introduce something called the true count. Let's not panic. It's just one tiny extra step. You take your running count, say pos 6, and divide it by the number of decks remaining. So if there are 3 decks left, your true count is pos 2. If only 1 deck left, true count is... And that matters. Because the fewer cards left in the shoe, the more accurate your count becomes. A high true count means a very player-favourable deck. Now, in real life, you're not sitting there with a calculator and a clipboard. You're estimating, roughly, casually. Good card counters aren't robots. They're cool, calm and relaxed. On the outside, they're just another person betting chips and pretending to be surprised by every hand. But inside, they're counting, quietly, patiently, like a sleepy ninja with a mental abacus. Here's a little simulation. Let's say you're watching a few cards being dealt. First card, 4. Second card, Queen. Third card, 2. Fourth card, 10. Fifth card, 3. Your running count is now. That tells you not much yet, but over time, if the count climbs to pos 5, pos 6, 7, now you know something. The deck is rich in high cards, and if the count drops into the negative, like 3 or 5, that means high cards have already come out. The rest of the deck? Meh. That's when the math people sit quietly. Small bets. No risk. And when the count swings up again, that's when they pounce. Now let's be real, doing this in an actual casino isn't easy. You've got distractions, people cheering, dealers talking, drinks appearing, flashing lights. Some guy next to you explaining his system based on moon phases and football scores. But if you can stay cool and keep the count quietly ticking in the back of your mind, you can do it. Some card counters practice by watching YouTube blackjack videos on mute, and keeping a count in real time. Others use apps or flashcards. Some just practice in their heads while grocery shopping. Whatever works. But again, and this is important, card counting doesn't guarantee you'll win.
It just slightly tilts the odds in your favor. Maybe 1%. Maybe 2%.
Which doesn't sound like much, but over hundreds or thousands of hands, it adds up. And that's enough to make casinos very uncomfortable. Now here's the part nobody tells you. Being a good card counter isn't really about math. It's about discipline. You have to bet small when it's boring. You have to wait and wait. Then, when the count is high and your heart is pounding, you have to bet big with a straight face. No smiling, no high fives, no "oh my god, I think I'm winning" moments. Just cool, quiet confidence. And when the count shifts, you shrink your bet right back down, like nothing ever happened. You blend in. You act average. You don't tip off the pit boss with your brilliant algebra skills and suspicious calm. You become part of the scenery. That's the art of it. And whether or not you ever use this skill in real life, whether or not you even play blackjack, just knowing how it works is kind of empowering. Because now you see the game behind the game. You see the math under the surface, the quiet rhythm beneath the flashing lights. And that, my friend, is the first real trick that casinos don't want you to know. Next up, we step away from blackjack and into the chaos of roulette. A game that looks simple, but hides some of the strangest gambling strategies in history. Let's give the wheel a spin. Ah, roulette. It looks so classy, so refined. That beautiful spinning wheel, the little white ball dancing like it's got somewhere to be, people dressed in suits, sipping martinis, casually placing chips on red or black, odd or even. But under all that elegance, chaos, pure, glorious, mathematical chaos. Let's break it down. Roulette is one of the oldest casino games still played today. The name literally means little wheel in French. Cute, right? But don't let the French charm fool you. This wheel does not love you. The rules are simple. There's a wheel with numbered pockets, usually 1 to 36, alternating red and black, and then there's the sneaky green pockets. In American roulette, there are 2 green pockets, 0 and 00. In European roulette, there's just 1. And those greens? That's where the house hides its edge. Let's say you bet on red. Seems like a 50-50 shot, right? Red or black, but it's not. Because of those pesky green pockets, the odds aren't 50-50. They're 18 out of 38 in American roulette, which is 40. That means over time, you'll lose more than you win. Slowly, smoothly, like a wheel turning. The house edge in American roulette is 5.26%. That's not horrible, but it's also not your friend. European roulette is slightly better, house edge of 2.7%, just because there's only 1 green slot. But here's the thing. Despite the odds, roulette feels winnable. You can bet on one number, or a colour, or dozens, or corners, or lines, or columns. It's a buffet of bets. Something for everyone, and that's why people love it. Now let's talk about the most famous and flawed roulette strategy of all time, the martingale system. This one is legendary. The idea is simple. You bet on red. If you lose, you double your bet. You lose again, double it again. Eventually, you win. And when you do, you win back all your losses and make a tiny profit. Sounds bulletproof, right? But here's the problem. Let's say you start with a $10 bet. You lose, you bet, lose again. Now, then 8, then 1. By the 6th loss, you're betting $640 to win just $10. And if you lose that bet, you're down over $1,000. Now imagine hitting 7 or 8 losses in a row. It happens more than you'd think. That's the flaw. The system doesn't account for reality, like table limits, or your bank account, or, anxiety. So the martingale system? Not exactly the magical math trick it pretends to be. There are other systems too. The Fibonacci system, which uses the famous Fibonacci sequence to structure bets. You lose, you go up in the sequence, win, and you go back a step. It sounds fancy. People like it because Fibonacci shows up in sunflowers and seashells. But in roulette, it's still just a guessing game dressed in poetry. Then there's the D'Alembert system, the Labouchere system, the Paroli system. So many systems, so little statistical support. Most of them are just ways to organize your losing streak into a prettier chart. And yet, we keep trying. Because we want to believe there's a way to outsmart the wheel. That luck can be tamed. That chaos can be managed. But roulette doesn't care about your system. It doesn't care about patterns. It doesn't care if it hit black 6 times in a row and must hit red next. That's the gambler's fallacy again. Thinking past spins affect future ones. They don't. Every spin is independent. The wheel doesn't remember you, or your tears. Now, to be fair, roulette has been beaten. Not by betting systems, but by people who noticed something strange. You see, in the real world, physical things aren't always perfect. Wheels get worn. Biases appear. Maybe the ball lands in certain areas more often than others. Maybe the wheel leans slightly. Maybe a tiny imperfection affects the bounce. Some very clever people, and we'll meet one of them soon, started tracking actual roulette outcomes over thousands of spins. And guess what? They found patterns. Not mystical, magical patterns. Just physical ones. Imperfections in the machine. By identifying biased wheels, they could bet smarter. Focus on sections of the wheel where the ball landed slightly more often. And it worked. But that's not about strategy. That's about physics and patience, and probably a little too much free time. Casinos didn't love that either. So they started swapping out wheels regularly, upgrading tables, adding more randomness. Roulette is no longer beatable in that way, at least not easily, but it still holds a special place in the casino. Not because it's beatable, but because it's hypnotic. That spinning motion, that bouncing ball, the gentle click-clack as it slows down. It's practically a lullaby, made of false hope. And for a moment, just before the ball lands, anything feels possible. That's the magic. That's the trap. Roulette is elegant, simple, dramatic, and utterly unpredictable. And deep down, we love that. Because even when the math tells us to walk away, something about the spin keeps pulling us in. So the next time you see a roulette table, whether in real life or just in a movie, remember what's hiding behind the glamour. A wheel, a ball, a few green pockets, and a whole lot of math. Coming up next, the story of a man who did beat the wheel, not with luck, not with guesses, but with spreadsheets and sheer obsessive determination. Let's meet the guy who studied a roulette wheel for a year and made it pay. Let's meet one of the most patient gamblers in history. His name? Gonzalo Gauthier Pelea, a Spanish music producer, a math enthusiast, and eventually a living legend in the world of roulette. But Gonzalo didn't walk into a casino looking to gamble. He walked in looking for a pattern. It all started in the early 1990s in Madrid. Gonzalo, always a curious soul, had been thinking about roulette, not as a game of luck, but as a machine, a physical object, a wheel, a ball, real things made by human hands. And what do we know about things made by humans? They're never perfect. Wheels can wear down, ball bearings can shift, tiny imperfections in manufacturing, alignment or balance can over time create bias. Now, to most people this is just background noise, but to Gonzalo, this was a symphony waiting to be analysed. So he did something unusual. He went to a casino, not to play, not to bet, just to observe. He and his family started recording the results of thousands of roulette spins. Manually, on paper. Every number, every spin, every time the ball bounced one way or another. They didn't do this for a day or a weekend. They did this for months. Eventually, they moved on to video cameras, secretly recording spin after spin after spin. Gonzalo later said they recorded over 30,000 outcomes. That's not a typo. 30,000. Then they fed the data into a computer. This was the early 90s, so picture a beige box humming in the corner of a smoky room, slowly crunching numbers while everyone drinks strong coffee and argues about probability. What they found was incredible. Certain numbers came up more often than they should. Not by a lot, but enough. Instead of a uniform distribution, where each number had an equal chance, some numbers had a slight advantage, a tiny edge, maybe 1% or 2% more likely to appear than others. And when you're dealing with thousands of spins, that's all you need. The Garcia-Pelayo family created a list of hot numbers with slightly higher probability based on their data. And then they started betting, but not recklessly. They were disciplined. They bet small amounts at first, tracked their wins and losses, tweaked the system, stayed under the radar, and it worked. They started making money, slowly, steadily, and a lot more. Soon they weren't just playing in Madrid. They were flying to Seville, to Las Vegas, to Australia, using their system, applying math, quietly beating roulette. Casinos started to notice. At first they were confused. Who were these calm, polite players making small bets and still walking away with profits? Then suspicion grew. Surveillance footage was reviewed. Dealers were interviewed. And eventually the Garcia-Pelayos were identified as a threat. They were banned from several casinos, which, again, wasn't because they cheated. They didn't. They simply understood the machine better than the people running it. In fact, the casinos tried to argue that what they were doing was illegal. But Gonzalo took them to court, and he won. The court ruled that if the roulette wheels were biased and players used that bias legally, that was the casino's problem, not the players. It was like telling a math teacher they're not allowed to use a calculator because it's too accurate. Eventually, casinos responded the only way they could. They replaced their wheels. They made sure every table was perfectly balanced. They added regular wheel swaps and more maintenance. Some even added digital sensors and increased randomness. But the damage was done. The myth and the math of Gonzalo Garcia-Pelayo was already legend. He proved something beautiful. That even in a world built on chance. Sometimes there's a pattern, and if you look close enough and long enough, that pattern can be revealed. But what really makes Gonzalo's story amazing isn't just the math, it's the patience, the discipline, the sheer level of obsession it takes to watch a wheel spin 30,000 times and go, yes, I see it now. And that's kind of the lesson here. Sometimes math isn't about formulas or symbols on a whiteboard. Sometimes it's about quietly noticing what others miss. And if that gets you banned from a casino, well, that's probably a sign you were doing something right. These days roulette is harder to beat. The wheels are better, the randomness more random. But still, Gonzalo's story lives on. Not as a get-rich scheme, but as a reminder that every system has a story. Even a spinning wheel. So the next time someone says roulette is pure luck, think of the man with the notebook, the camera, and the endless patience, who proved that luck sometimes takes the shape of numbers. Coming up next, we go from wheels to reels, slot machines. Flashing lights, big sounds, tiny odds, and enough psychology to make a lab rat sweat. Let's pull the lever and find out what's really going on behind those blinking screens. Ah, yes, the slot machine, the glittering queen of the casino. The blinking, beeping, music-playing money magnet that lures in more players and profits than any other game in the building. It's loud. It's bright. It looks like it's having way more fun than everyone else in the room. But behind the flashing lights, a mirage. A beautiful, deceptive, mathematical mirage. Let's rewind. Slot machine started off simple. 1 lever, 3 reels, a few symbols, cherries, bars, bells. You'd pull the handle, the reels would spin, and if they lined up just right, back then you could actually see the odds. If each reel had, say, 10 symbols and only one jackpot symbol, then the odds of hitting all three were easy to figure out. 1 in 10 dies, 1 in 10 dies, 1 in... That's it, straightforward math. Basic probabilities. But then came the digital age. Modern slot machines don't use mechanical reels anymore. They use computers. Inside every machine is something called an RNG, a random number generator. The RNG is constantly running, spitting out numbers every millisecond, even when nobody's playing. The moment you hit the spin button, it stops, and that number decides where the virtual reels will land. But here's the twist. Each symbol on the reel isn't equally likely, because now the computer can weight outcomes. Let's say there are 20 stops on a reel, but the jackpot symbol only appears once. And worse, maybe some symbols look common, but only show up once in the code. Others look rare, but appear more often. That's the illusion. You see 3 jackpot symbols scroll past in a single spin. You think, wow, I almost had it. But the math says, nah, that was never close. These machines are engineered to feel generous while staying extremely stingy.
And the near miss? That moment when 2 symbols line up and the third just barely doesn't? That's not an accident. It's designed. Studies have shown that near misses activate the same part of your brain as actual wins, which is bananas. You didn't win, you definitely lost. But your brain still says, ooh, so close. Let's try again. Slot machines use sound, light, motion, and even seat vibration to reward your senses. Even small wins trigger fanfares and flashing screens, even if you've bet $2 and won 50 cents. Your brain doesn't do the math. It hears the music and thinks, I'm crushing it. And then there's something called the return to player, or RTP. This is the percentage of total money a slot machine is programmed to return to players over time. For example, if a machine has an RTP of 95%, it means that over thousands of spins, it will give back $95 for every $100 bet. But here's the sneaky part.
That doesn't mean you will get back 95%. That's just the average over millions of spins. One person might hit big, most won't. But the casino, they always get their cut.
The house edge on slots is usually between 5% and 15%, depending on the game, which in casino terms is like swimming with bricks in your pockets. But people still love slots. Why? Because they're easy. No strategy, no thinking, just press the button and hope. And because of something called a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, that's a fancy psychology phrase that means you don't know when you'll win, so you keep trying just in case. It's the same principle that makes social media addictive, or why people keep checking their phones for texts that never come. Slot machines are basically your emotionally unavailable ex. You never know when they'll light up, but when they do, oh, it feels amazing. There's also the comfort factor. You don't have to talk to anyone. No dealers, no judging looks. You can sit alone, sip your drink, and zone out in front of the screen while your wallet slowly evaporates. Some people even reach a sort of trance state, often called the slot machine zone. Time disappears, decisions blur. You're just spinning and watching and hoping. Casinos know this. They place machines in strategic locations. They adjust the sounds and animations to increase playtime. Some machines are looser, meaning they pay out slightly more, and those are often placed near walkways, so people walking by see others winning. It's all part of the mirage. But here's a fun twist. Just like roulette, some slots have been beaten. In rare cases, people have found glitches or patterns. One famous case involved a team from Eastern Europe who used slow-motion video to analyze spin timings and predict outcomes on certain older machines. Another involved a programmer who built slot machines and later figured out how to exploit a bug in the code. He walked away with millions before getting caught. Again, not legal, but impressive. For the rest of us, slots remain what they've always been, entertainment, fast, flashy, and fun, until they're not. But understanding the math behind them makes a big difference. You stop expecting to win. You start recognizing the little tricks, the sound design, the psychology, the illusion of control, and when you see it clearly, the magic fades just enough for you to walk away, maybe even with your wallet intact. So next time someone tells you they have a lucky machine, smile politely, but you'll know that luck isn't built into the machine, only loss is, and the longer you play, the more you pay to see the lights blink. Coming up next, we shift from games to philosophy, from randomness to reason. Let's ask a deeper question. Can math really beat luck? So, can math beat luck? It's kind of the question we've been circling this whole time, isn't it? And depending on who you ask, you'll get wildly different answers. Ask a mathematician, and they might say, define luck. Ask a gambler, and they'll probably say, it did once, that one time, on a Tuesday. I remember. Ask a casino, and they'll just smile and hand you a drink. But let's take a step back, a big, soft, sleepy step. Let's talk about what we really mean by luck, and what math can actually do with it. When most people say luck, they're talking about randomness that happens to go in their favor, winning a jackpot, getting dealt a perfect hand, bumping into someone you've been meaning to call for years, in a grocery store, that kind of thing. Luck feels magical because it feels personal, like the universe looked at you and said, hey, you, let's do something fun today. But from a mathematical standpoint, luck is just probability playing out. Let's say you flip a coin 10 times, and it lands on heads 7 times. That feels lucky. But it's not impossible. In fact, it happens about 17% of the time. That's not rare, that's basically a Tuesday in probability land. But if you flip a coin 10,000 times, you'd expect it to even out. The more trials you run, the more results settle into a predictable pattern. That's called the law of large numbers. And that's where math lives. Not in the one amazing spin, not in the miracle hand, but in the patterns that emerge over time. That's the difference between variance and expectation. Variance is the randomness of short-term results, the wild swings, the wins, the heartbreak. Expectation is the average result over many, many repetitions. So when we ask, can math beat luck? We're really asking, can understanding probability help us win more often over time? And the answer? Yes, sometimes. In specific cases, with discipline and a whole lot of patience. Think about the MIT Blackjack Team. They didn't win every hand. In fact, they probably lost tons of them. But over time, with enough plays, their strategy gave them an edge. A small but real advantage that math predicted and reality delivered. They didn't beat luck. They outlasted it. But most people don't play that way. Most people go to casinos for fun, for thrill, for those big lucky moments. And math doesn't do big moments. It does slow, boring, persistent truth, which makes it kind of hard to sell, honestly. Because luck is shiny. Luck is exciting. Luck has a soundtrack and a spotlight and a catchphrase.
Math doesn't.
Math whispers. It says, hey, if you do this 1,000,000 times, here's what will probably happen. Which is super useful, but not very cinematic. Now, let's be clear, there are things math can't do. It can't predict the next spin of a fair roulette wheel. It can't guarantee your next card. It can't protect you from weird coincidences, or that one uncle who always wins at scratch-offs for no apparent reason. But what math can do better than anything else is help you make smart decisions under uncertainty. That's really the heart of it. Whether you're at a blackjack table, deciding whether to hit or stand, or in real life deciding whether to take a job, move cities, or order sushi at 3 a.m., you're dealing with probabilities, with risks, with incomplete information, and math. Math helps you navigate that world. It gives you tools, not answers, not guarantees, just better guesses. Because life, like gambling, is messy. There are no sure things. But if you understand the odds, really understand them, you can make peace with the randomness, and maybe even enjoy it. In a way, that's what casinos teach us. They're little laboratories of uncertainty. Everything looks shiny and loud, but underneath, it's just math in motion. Now, can you beat luck by playing perfectly? Sometime. Can you beat it every time? No. But maybe the point isn't to beat luck. Maybe the point is to understand it. To stop fearing it. To stop chasing it. To stop thinking it's some magical force and start seeing it as just math wearing a fancy outfit. And once you do that, you can breathe a little easier. You can say, I lost, but that's how the odds work. Or I won, but I'm not a genius. I just got a nice variance blip. Or I have no idea what's happening, but I'm ordering dessert anyway. That's math at its most human. It doesn't erase randomness. It just puts it in context. So, can math beat luck? Sometimes. But more importantly, math makes luck less scary. And that might be the best trick of all. Next, we'll move from philosophy back into cards, but this time it's not blackjack. We're going to the smoky, mind game-filled tables of poker where math meets psychology and bluffing meets game theory. Let's talk about the strategy behind the stare down. Alright, let's dim the lights a little. Imagine a poker table, the green felt, the stacks of chips, the soft shuffle of cards, a guy in sunglasses, someone else in a hoodie, a dealer with a perfect poker face, and you, trying not to sweat through your shirt. Poker is a little different from the games we've talked about so far. Because unlike slots or roulette or even blackjack, poker isn't really about the house. It's about the other players. You're not trying to beat a machine. You're trying to beat people with emotions, habits, fears, and questionable decision-making skills. That makes poker part math, part psychology, and part dramatic movie scene. And behind it all, game theory. Let's start with what that is. Game theory is the study of decision-making in situations where your outcome depends not just on what you do, but on what others do too. It's like strategic thinking, but with equations behind it. The simplest example, rock, paper, scissors. If you always throw rock, a smart opponent will always throw paper, so you have to mix it up. Randomize. Keep them guessing. But if they always throw scissors, well, now you've got an edge. That's game theory. Trying to make the best decision while accounting for your opponent's possible decisions. In poker, it shows up everywhere. Let's say you're holding a mediocre hand. Nothing special. But the other players don't know that. You make a big bet. They pause. They hesitate. Now, what do? If they believe you, they fold. You win. If they don't, they call. And you lose. But what if you know they're the type to fold easily? Now, it's not just about your cards. It's about them. Welcome to the math of bluffing. Bluffing isn't just lying for fun. It's a calculated move. And great players don't bluff randomly. They bluff strategically in ways that make mathematical sense. Let's get cozy with a simple idea called pot odds. Say there's $100 in the pot. Your opponent bets to stay in the game. You have to match that 20. Now you're thinking, is it worth it? Pot odds help you decide. You compare the size of the pot to the size of the bet. In this case, you'd be paying $20 to win $120 total. That's 1 in 6 odds. So if you think you have at least a 1 in 6 chance of winning, the math says go for it. This kind of thinking separates casual players from pros. Because poker isn't just about reading faces, it's about understanding risk versus reward, over and over again. And sometimes the best decision is to fold a decent hand. Other times it's to bet big with a weak hand, because your opponent's more likely to panic than to call. But here's where game theory gets juicy. There's something called the Nash equilibrium, named after mathematician John Nash. Yes, the guy from A Beautiful Mind. It's a game theory concept that says, in a competitive situation, if everyone plays their best strategy, and nobody can improve their outcome by changing their own move, that's equilibrium. In poker, that means if you play perfectly, balancing your bluffs and your real bets, your opponent can't take advantage of you. They might still win, sure, but they can't exploit your pattern. And poker is all about patterns. If you bluff too much, people catch on. If you bluff too little, they know you only bet when you're strong. So great players randomize. They become unreadable. They bluff sometimes, not always. They use math to decide how often to bluff based on the situation. Like a probability ninja. And the math tells us, even bluffing should follow rules. There's actually a formula called the minimum defense frequency, which tells players how often they need to call a bet, just to prevent being bluffed every time. It's a battle of balance. You bluff just enough. They call just enough. The dance continues. And even though poker feels like a game of hunches and heartbeats and staring contests, underneath, it's just numbers. Win probabilities, betting frequencies, expected values. Of course humans aren't robots. We get nervous. We misread people. We fall in love with our cards. We get tilted. That's poker slang for when your emotions take the wheel and drive you into a brick wall. But even that is part of the game. Because a calm player who sticks to good math and doesn't tilt. That's dangerous. That's the person who wins, slowly, quietly, not with wild bluffs, but with smart decisions. Now let's be clear, poker isn't a guaranteed way to make money. There's still luck, still variance. You can play perfectly and lose. You can play badly and win. But over time, the math reveals the truth. And that's the beautiful, cozy, slightly scary part of it all. In poker, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, just the most consistent. You don't have to win every hand, just the right ones. And if you understand the numbers even just a little, you already have an edge over most players at the table. So whether you ever play or not, poker is a brilliant little mirror of real life. You never have all the information. You're always making decisions under pressure. Sometimes you bluff, sometimes you fold, and sometimes you go all in and hope for the best. Coming up next, we leave the smoky poker tables and head into the bright, wild world of lotteries, where people try to beat millions to one odds, and sometimes actually do. Let's talk about the loopholes in the system, and the folks who found them. Alright, time to talk about one of the strangest games humans have ever invented, the lottery, where your odds of winning the jackpot are roughly equal to being hit by lightning while wrestling a shark during a solar eclipse, while balancing on one foot. And yet, people win. Not just once, not just by chance. Some people have actually cracked the system. Not by magic, not by luck, but by finding real, honest-to-math loopholes. Let's start with a man named Jerry Selby. Jerry was a retired shop owner in a small town in Michigan. Nothing fancy, just a guy who liked puzzles and coffee, and apparently reading the fine print. One day in 2003, he came across a new lottery game called Windfall. Now, most lotteries work like this. If nobody wins the jackpot, the money rolls over to the next draw. That's called a rollover. But in Windfall, something different happened. If the jackpot reached $5 million and nobody won, the money didn't roll over. It rolled down, meaning it was distributed among lower tier winners. That's key, because suddenly, getting 4 or 5 numbers right, which normally earned you a pat on the back and a coffee, now earned thousands of dollars. And Jerry? Jerry did the math. He figured out that if he bought enough tickets, we're talking thousands, and spread his number picks across all possible combinations, he could guarantee a profit during roll-down weeks. It wasn't illegal, it wasn't cheating, it was just noticing. So, he started buying tickets. A few thousand at first, then tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tickets per draw. He formed a group with family and friends. They'd drive to gas stations, filling out playslips for hours. Sometimes they'd bring their own furniture. Just imagine a folding table next to the lottery machine. Peak grandma energy. And they made money.
Real money. Millions.
Eventually, students from MIT caught wind of the same loophole. They ran computer simulations, crunched probabilities, and confirmed what Jerry had found. So now, two different groups, hundreds of miles apart, were exploiting the same game. The MIT crew also formed an investment group, raised money, bought truckloads of tickets, played during roll-down weeks only. And yes, they profited too. You might be wondering, why didn't the lottery stop them? Well, the thing is, the lottery knew, but they didn't care, because the ticket sales were legal. The players weren't cheating. In fact, the state still profited through taxes and the boost in sales during these huge buy-ins. It wasn't until journalists started sniffing around that the public found out. Suddenly, headlines were screaming, MIT students rig the lottery, math genius exploits state game. The real story, of course, was much more boring and much more brilliant. Nobody rigged anything. They just read the rules and actually understood them. Eventually, the state shut down the windfall game. Too much attention, too many smart people ruining the fun. But let's pause here and appreciate something. Most people see the lottery as pure chance. You pick numbers, you hope. Maybe you use birthdays, or lucky socks, or your dog's favourite chew toy. But under the hood, it's all math. And sometimes the math doesn't add up the way it's supposed to. There have been other stories too, like the Canadian man who won multiple times. Not because he was lucky, but because he figured out how to spot poorly randomized scratch-off games. He realized that certain print runs made it possible to predict where winning tickets were more likely to be, just by looking at tiny patterns on the ticket codes. So he'd drive from store to store buying tickets from very specific batches. Again, not illegal, just observant. Then there was the case of Romanian-Australian economist Stefan Mandel, who won the lottery 14 times. Yes, you heard that right, 14. This strategy was genius and a bit bonkers. He created a formula to predict sets of numbers with higher chances of winning. But more than that, he bought every possible combination when jackpots grew big enough to guarantee a return. He and his investors printed out millions of tickets manually, literally filled entire warehouses with paper. At one point, his team won a $27 million jackpot, legally. Eventually, governments adjusted the rules to prevent this from happening again, but not before Mandel had made his mark. And a lot of money. These stories aren't just entertaining, they reveal something deeper. Even in systems built on randomness, flaws exist. And with enough patience, curiosity and, well, Excel spreadsheets, those flaws can be found. Now let's be honest, most of us will never exploit a lottery. We're not buying 300,000 tickets. We're not scanning scratchers with microscopes. But that's not the point. The point is, understanding the math makes you see things differently. You stop seeing lotteries as magical. You stop hoping the numbers are due. You stop wasting time on systems that don't make sense. And instead, you start asking better questions. Like, what are the actual odds? Is this game winnable? What's the expected value? Do I want to invest in this, or just enjoy the fantasy? Because sometimes, playing the lottery is fun. It's a tiny dream, a cheap ticket to imagine a different life. And that's okay. Just remember, the system isn't designed to make you rich. It's designed to make the state money. To make losing feel entertaining. To make rare wins look common. And when you understand that, you're already ahead. Coming up next, we return to the casino floor, where the house isn't just defending itself, it's fighting back. Let's explore how casinos upgraded their defenses when the math nerds started winning. Surveillance, counter techniques, and maybe a little bit of panic. So far we've met card counters, lottery hackers, and quiet geniuses who cracked games with nothing but brains and spreadsheets. And while most casino guests never notice anything strange, behind the scenes, the house has been watching. Casinos may look glamorous, with chandeliers, fountains, and slightly too expensive buffet crab legs. But make no mistake, these are security fortresses, wrapped in velvet, built on math, armed with cameras, computers, and highly caffeinated staff. Because when players started using math to beat the games, especially blackjack, casinos didn't just shrug. They got serious. Let's rewind to the days of the MIT Blackjack Team. They were counting cards, making headlines, and taking millions. Casinos noticed, and their response wasn't subtle. First, they started tracking behavior. A player walks in, bets small, plays perfect basic strategy. Then boom, suddenly starts betting huge. That's a red flag, because normal players don't do that. They play by feel. They chase losses. They drink. They make mistakes. The card counters. They're disciplined, quiet, emotionless, which ironically makes them stand out. So casinos built up surveillance, not just a few cameras, hundreds, mounted on ceilings, tucked into lights, pointed at every table, all feeding into a central hub known as the eye in the sky. Picture a giant dark room glowing with monitors, filled with security personnel watching players like hawks. They're not looking for cheaters. Not really. They're looking for perfect play. Too perfect. Someone who hits on 16 against a 10 stands on a soft 18 when they should. Splits 80s every time, even when it feels wrong. It might look boring, but to a trained eye, that's strategy. And strategy can be suspicious. Then came the databases. If a player was caught or even suspected of counting cards at one casino, their name and photo would often be added to internal lists, sometimes shared between casino chains, sometimes kept in books, like the infamous Griffin book, a catalogue of known card counters and advantage players. These days it's even more advanced. Many casinos use facial recognition software. Yes, really. The moment you walk in, your face is scanned and compared against a database. If you've ever been backed off, or banned, or just looked a little too good at math, there's a chance you'll be flagged. And then someone, very politely, will ask you to leave. Or worse, they'll let you keep playing, knowing the odds are in their favour again. That's the real mind game. But wait, it gets deeper. Casinos also started using automatic shufflers at blackjack tables. These machines constantly reshuffle the cards, making traditional card counting nearly impossible, because if the deck is being reset after every hand, there's nothing to count. Problem solved. They introduced 6-deck and 8-deck shoes, making the math more complex and the count slower to shift. They also train dealers to spot suspicious behavior, betting patterns, player signals, nervous energy that looks a little too focused. And some casinos even employed in-house mathematicians, actual statisticians hired to analyze player data and identify anomalies. Imagine working your whole life in math just to become a human lie detector for blackjack. Weirdly noble. Casinos also got creative with how they responded to suspected counters. Sometimes it was polite. Sir, the table is closed, or we've decided not to take your action. Other times, not so much. Players have reported being followed, interrogated, physically removed. Some were threatened with lawsuits. Others had chips confiscated. And while none of this is technically illegal, remember casinos are private businesses, it can be unsettling. But let's be fair, casinos aren't trying to be evil. They're protecting their business model. They rely on the math working in their favour. When someone flips the math, even slightly, that's a risk. From the casino's perspective, advantage players aren't playing the game. They're breaking it. And sure, it's legal, but it's not welcome. So the arms race began. Smart players got sneakier. Casinos got smarter. New strategies, new countermeasures, new disguises. It became chess. Played in real time, with chips and sunglasses. And here's the poetic twist. All of this, all the cameras, the software, the counter-surveillance, exists because math works. Casinos know that someone somewhere could beat them. Not with luck, not with cheating, but with cold, calm, careful math. That's why they're watching, because one edge, Even a 1% edge over thousands of bets adds up, and they're not willing to lose that edge quietly. So next time you walk into a casino and see flashing lights, dancing fountains and smiling dealers, remember, there's a second casino hidden behind the mirrors, watching, calculating, adapting. And somewhere in a dark room filled with screens, someone just zoomed in on your face to see if your eyes look a little too focused. Coming up next, we explore what some players did after being banned, the world of disguises, fake identities, and increasingly ridiculous attempts to keep beating the game. Yes, we're talking wigs, and moustaches, and trench coats. It's time for the weirdest chapter yet. So, what do you do when you've been banned from every major casino? When your name's on a list, your photo's on a wall, and security knows your shoe size from 100 feet away? Well, you get creative. Welcome to the weird and wonderful world of casino disguises, where math geniuses became undercover operatives, blending into the background with a wig, a fake ID, and a whole lot of confidence. Let's start with the basics. When casinos first started banning advantage players, especially card counters, they did it the old-fashioned way. They took your picture, maybe made a copy of your driver's license, shared it with other casinos. Simple stuff. But as surveillance improved, so did the players' tactics. Enter the costume phase. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Players began changing their appearance to sneak back in. Wigs, glasses, hats, fake facial hair. Some shaved their heads, others grew beards. One guy wore an eye patch. Was he injured? Nope, just trying not to get recognized by the blackjack pit boss in Atlantic City. Some went full Hollywood. There are reports of card counters using latex masks, colored contact lenses, prosthetic noses. One even tried to age himself up 20 years with makeup and a cane. Respect. Others went the opposite route, dressing like sloppy tourists. Loud shirts, bad posture, sunglasses indoors, and the general vibe of someone who lost their passport and their dignity in the same night. Why? Because casinos profile. They expect a card counter to be sharp, focused, disciplined. So some players leaned into the opposite. They acted confused, spilled drinks, played a few bad hands on purpose, chatted with dealers about golf, even if they'd never seen a club in real life. Some even brought props. Maps, disposable cameras, Hawaiian shirts. The whole "I just wandered in off a tour bus" look. And it worked. Sometimes. But the best disguise? A different person entirely. Some players created new identities. Real names, fake backstories, rented apartments, opened bank accounts, got IDs under slightly altered names. One player went from Michael James to James Michael and added a fake middle name just to buy time. It sounds extreme, but remember, if you're winning big and getting banned everywhere, a new identity might be the only way to keep playing. In fact, some teams had entire databases of fake identities. One guy would play as Jeff the golf pro at one casino, then switch to Steve the electrical engineer in another, and they practiced. Voices, mannerisms, where they were supposedly from, their favourite sports teams. One team member said it felt like doing community theatre with a 6-figure prize on the line. Now, not all of these attempts were successful. One legendary story involves a card counter who disguised himself with a long wig, tinted glasses, and a fake tan. He walked into a casino feeling confident, only to have security walk up within 5 minutes and say, "Welcome back. Nice wig." Ouch. Others were recognized by voice, by posture, even by how they handled chips. You see, card counters tend to move chips in a very specific way. Calculated, smooth, minimal flair. It's the poker face of hands. Some casinos started analyzing how people touched the chips. Creepy? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. But even with all this effort, and all these layers of makeup, the best disguise was always the same. being forgettable. The truly successful players didn't wear funny hats or fake mustaches. They just blended in. No big wins, no emotional reactions, just boring, average behavior. No one remembers the quiet guy who lost $50 and didn't say a word. That guy could be a card counter, or an accountant, or just a tired tourist who didn't understand the rules. And that's the goal. Because when you're trying to outsmart a billion-dollar industry with cameras in the chandeliers, subtlety is your best friend. Still, we have to appreciate the creativity. Some card counters had literal wardrobes just for casinos. One outfit per casino, one set of mannerisms, one persona. Some even changed their names in the casino rewards programs to stay off the radar. Others took it even further. One guy learned to walk with a limp, another practiced speaking with a slight accent. There are stories, possibly exaggerated, but definitely amazing, of players faking being drunk, wearing braces they didn't need, or limping with a fake knee brace just to throw off recognition. And here's the kicker. All of this, the wigs, the glasses, the fake IDs, was in service of playing one game with a 1% edge. That's how powerful math is. People were willing to become completely different people just to keep playing a game they'd already solved. Because the math doesn't care if you're wearing a wig, the count is still the count. And if the count is high, and the casino believes you're just another happy-go-lucky tourist from Nebraska with an unfortunate mustache, you win. Of course, most casinos caught on. And today, with facial recognition, biometric data, and surveillance software more advanced than most airports, disguises are less effective than they used to be. But the stories, they live on. They remind us that math isn't just about numbers, it's about identity, strategy, adaptation, and sometimes wearing a wig in public. Coming up next, we'll look at how the casinos didn't just fight back with cameras. They fought back with math of their own. Let's meet the people casinos hired to defend their games using the same weapons that were used to beat them. Yes, it's time to meet the math police. Alright, so imagine this. You're a casino executive. You've got chandeliers. You've got whale players betting tens of thousands per hand. You've got a guy singing Sinatra in the lounge. Life is good. And then someone whispers in your ear, Sir? There's a kid at table 4 betting perfectly. Suddenly you're sweating. Because if there's one thing casinos fear more than cheaters, it's mathematicians. Enter the math police. Okay, they don't actually wear badges. And they don't drive around in cars with sirens made of calculators. But they might be the most powerful force inside the casino. Let's talk about them. When card counting became a serious threat in the 70s and 80s, thanks in part to our friends from MIT, casinos realized they couldn't just rely on dealers and pit bosses. They needed data. So they hired people who could speak fluent probability. Statisticians, analysts, people with math degrees, and suspiciously quiet social lives. These weren't just number crunchers. These were game protectors. People who analysed player behaviour across thousands of hands to detect patterns that might reveal an edge. They'd build models, watch betting curves, flag players who suddenly changed their bet sizes when the deck got hot. They were the human firewalls of the gambling world. Let's say you're a casino analyst watching a table. You notice a player who's flat betting the same amount for 40 minutes. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, they start betting 10 times as much. Now, maybe they just got lucky. Maybe they're feeling bold. Or maybe they're counting. As the analyst, you look at the timing. You compare their bets to the cards that came before. You calculate whether their actions line up too perfectly with what a card counter would do. And if it all adds up, you sound the alarm. Pit bosses are notified. Surveillance is called, drinks are offered, politely. The guest might be invited to try a different game, maybe even taken to the back, which sounds ominous, but usually just means a chat in a very beige office. The best part, the players almost never know who caught them, because the math police work behind the scenes. No uniforms, no drama, just data. And casinos don't stop there. They also hire game developers, the people who design slot machines and table games, to build in subtle protections against advantage play. Some machines include random number generation that adjusts based on play patterns. Others incorporate elements of adaptive randomness, where the odds shift ever so slightly in real time to maintain the house edge. It's math fighting math. You have a team of players out there tracking decks, optimizing bets, maybe even disguising themselves with fake beards. And on the other side, you've got a quiet math nerd with 3 monitors, a massive database, and a list of red flags longer than a poker tournament. They might use z-tests to detect if a player's win rate is statistically abnormal, or logistic regression to determine the probability that a player is using a known strategy. They even have models to simulate thousands of fake players to compare behavior. If you've ever felt judged by a spreadsheet, these folks take it to the next level. One former casino analyst once said, "Our goal wasn't to catch every card counter. It was to make them feel like they'd never get away with it." That's psychological warfare. But with charts. Casinos also built central player databases, systems that track everything about you. How much you bet, how often you visit, what games you prefer, how long you stay, what you eat at the buffet. Okay, maybe not that last one, maybe. The idea is to profile your behavior. Are you a typical player? Or are you doing something? Now, before this sounds too spooky, remember, casinos are businesses, big ones. And like any business, they want to reduce risk. If someone is threatening their bottom line, even with legal smart play, they want to know, and the best way to know, hire a math person. Some even call them advantage play consultants. These folks travel between casinos, training staff on how to spot suspicious patterns. Sometimes they even play undercover, testing the casino's defenses. Imagine being hired to try to beat a game, just to see if it's beatable. That's not just a job. That's a Netflix series waiting to happen. Of course, all this math doesn't guarantee perfect defense. Some players still slip through. Some systems get tricked, and every once in a while, the house does get beat. But for the most part, these mathematical countermeasures have leveled the playing field. Not by making games fairer, let's not get carried away, but by making them resistant to manipulation. So now, the war isn't just at the table, it's in the code, in the data, in the soft hum of analytics running behind the blinking lights. And that's kind of beautiful, in a weird way, because casinos were once all gut instinct. Now, they're statistics with mood lighting. So next time you walk through a casino, sipping your soda and casually watching the roulette wheel spin, remember, behind the scenes, someone's probably watching you too.
Not with suspicion.
Just with spreadsheets. Coming up next, we zoom out and get philosophical again. Let's ask a big question. Is it ethical to beat the house? When you've figured out the math and the casino still doesn't like it, are you the villain or just a very polite rebel? Let's find out. Let's take a deep breath. We've heard the stories, the math tricks, the disguises, the edge-seeking geniuses and the watching eyes of the casino. But now, let's ask the big question. Is it ethical to beat the house? Like really? You're not stealing, you're not cheating, you're just using math, using skill, playing within the rules, even if casinos don't exactly love what you're doing. So, are you doing anything wrong? Let's start with the basics. Casinos by design are not fair games. They are built to take your money. The games are weighted in favor of the house. The longer you play, the more likely you are to lose. That's not a bug. That's the business model. But casinos are also legal, regulated, and, let's be honest, kind of fun. So society accepts this imbalance. We say, okay, we know the odds are against us, but we're willing to play anyway, because the lights are cool and the drinks are free. It's a deal. A strange one, maybe, but a deal nonetheless. Now imagine someone walks in and flips that equation.
They understand the game better. They've studied, they've practiced, they bet smart, stay cool, and walk out with more money than they walked in with.
Did they break the deal? Or did they just play better? Some say it's perfectly fair. After all, the casino invites you to play. If you play well, really well, and win, that's your right. It's not your fault the game was beatable. You didn't write the rules. You just read them closely. And it's not like the casino would return your money if you lost using bad strategy. No refunds for poor decisions is kind of their whole thing. So if someone takes the time to learn how to gain an edge and stays within the law, then many people would argue that's just smart. That's the system working both ways. Others, though, see it differently. They argue that advantage play is like gaming the spirit of the game, even if you're not breaking the letter of the rules. Casinos exist in a strange ethical space. They create environments where losing feels exciting, where winning feels achievable, and where people, especially the most vulnerable, can get pulled into dangerous cycles. So when someone comes in and uses math to take their money back, well, to the casino, that feels like a threat. They'll say, sure, it's legal, but it's not in good faith. But here's the counter-argument. What does good faith mean in a casino? Is it good faith when slot machines play a celebration jingle even when you lose money? Is it good faith to design table games with rules so complex most people don't realize how bad their odds are? Is it good faith to pump extra oxygen into the air and remove all clocks so you forget what time it is? Because that sounds less like a fair playground and more like a psychology experiment. So if a player walks in with clear eyes, plays by the rules, and happens to understand the math better than most, can you really say they're the unethical one? Still, there's a grey area. Let's talk about intent. Some players just want to enjoy the game to see if they can beat it. It's curiosity. It's challenge. It's art. Others turn it into a business. They bring in investors, wear disguises, exploit vulnerable systems, and sometimes the line between legal and shady gets blurry. Some card counters have been known to mark cards with tiny scratches. That's cheating. Some slot exploiters tampered with machines. Also cheating. But using your brain? Still legal. Still allowed. At least for now. So maybe the better question isn't, is it ethical to beat the house? Maybe the question is, what kind of player do you want to be? Are you here for fun, for strategy, for rebellion? Do you want to play a game that's almost fair and see if you can push the odds just slightly in your favour? Or are you content knowing the house always wins and still playing anyway, just for the ride? There's no right answer. Casinos are complicated places. They represent hope, risk, excitement and loss, all under one roof. They give us a place to test our luck, our nerve, and sometimes our math skills. And honestly, there's something kind of poetic about walking into a place built on illusions and seeing it clearly for what it is. It doesn't mean you have to play, but it means you understand the game. And in a world full of noise and flash and misdirection, that kind of clarity is rare. So if you ever sit at a blackjack table, eyes calm, mind sharp, count running silently in your head, and you win, don't feel guilty. You earned it. Coming up next, let's step back from the chips and cards for a moment and look at what casinos and gambling can teach us about real life, about risk, about randomness, about how we make decisions every day without even realizing we're gambling. Let's zoom out. All right, let's leave the blackjack table behind. Push back the slot machines. Step outside into the night air. It's quiet. The sounds of the casino fade into the background. And now that we've seen the games, the math, the tricks, the counters, the disguises, the eye in the sky, let's ask a new question. What does all of this tell us about real life? Because here's the secret. Casinos aren't just buildings full of games. They're tiny metaphors for how we deal with uncertainty, with choice, with risk. In life, just like in a casino, you make decisions with incomplete information. Should I take this job? Move to this city. Call that person back. Eat the mystery leftovers in the fridge. You don't know what the outcome will be, so you weigh the options, estimate the odds, take a breath, and make your move. That's gambling. Every day, all the time. Without chips or flashing lights, you're making bets. Small ones, big ones, subconscious ones. And here's where the casino becomes oddly poetic, because in the casino the rules are written, the odds are known, even if they're hidden under bright colours and carnival sounds. But in life, the rules are fuzzy. The house edge is unclear. The deck might be stacked or it might just feel that way. Still, we play, we try, we hope. Sometimes we bluff, sometimes we fold. Sometimes we go all in on something we believe in, even if the math looks terrifying. Casinos also teach us something else. People are terrible at understanding randomness. We see patterns where there are none. We think hot streaks are real. We believe in luck, even when we know better. You watch someone win 3 times in a row, and part of your brain whispers, they must be good. But maybe they just got lucky. Then again, that same brain will say, I haven't won in a while, so I'm due. Also not true. Randomness doesn't care about fairness. And yet, knowing that doesn't stop us from feeling it, because we're human. We want things to make sense. We want to believe that life has rhythm and justice and karma and meaning. But randomness? It just spins. So what do we do? Do we stop playing? Do we hide from risk? Do we run away from anything that doesn't come with a guarantee? Maybe. Some people do. But casinos offer another option. They remind us, you can know the odds and still place a bet. Not because you're reckless, but because you've done the math. And because some things, love, art, dreams, late night nachos, are worth the risk. That's what probability teaches us. Not how to win every time, but how to make decisions you can live with. To bet when the edge is good. To walk away when the numbers go cold. To know the difference between a smart risk and a hopeful leap into nonsense. And maybe, most importantly, to be okay with losing. Because even when you do everything right, you can still lose. That's true in casinos. That's true in relationships. That's true in basically any situation involving your bank account and a home espresso machine. But the math helps. Not because it promises victory, but because it gives you a map. A blurry, imperfect, constantly shifting map. But a map nonetheless. It says, here's what you know, here's what you don't, and here's how you can make the best move, given the hand you're holding. It's not always glamorous. It's not always dramatic. But it's honest. And in a world full of noise, honesty is kind of beautiful. So next time you make a decision, try this. Pause. Ask, what are the odds? What's the potential reward? What's the risk? What's the cost if I'm wrong? And if the answer feels good, if the math checks out or even just feels right in your bones, place the bet. Not just in a casino. In life. Try the thing. Send the message. Take the chance. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't knowing you'll win. It's deciding to play anyway. Coming up next, our final chapter. A gentle truth. A soft laugh. And maybe the real trick casinos taught us all along. Let's talk about when to walk away. Let's take one last look around the casino floor. You've seen the slots blinking, the blackjack dealers sliding cards like poetry, the roulette wheel spinning in lazy circles. You've watched the high rollers, the nervous first-timers, the guy who's clearly betting with his rent money. You've seen the math behind the magic, and the illusion behind the math. And after all that, here's a funny little truth. The real trick isn't beating the house. It's knowing when to walk away. And wow, that's a hard one. Because walking away goes against every instinct we have. You win, you want to ride the wave. You lose, you want to chase it back. You're almost there. You're due. You can't leave now. But casinos, and maybe life, are built to keep you at the table. They make staying easy and leaving feel like giving up. But let's zoom out. In blackjack, even if you're counting cards, the edge is maybe 1%. That means you're still going to lose a lot. But over time, with patience, the math plays out. Still, the moment you get emotional, tilted, greedy, overconfident, that tiny edge vanishes. Because math doesn't work when your brain is on fire. So walking away, that's part of the strategy. It's not quitting. It's winning quietly. It's having the discipline to say that's enough. It's the part of the story no one talks about. A guy who walked away after a small win and bought groceries. The woman who cashed out before she got tired. The team that left the casino when the count went cold even though their instinct said just one more shoe. Because walking away isn't just about protecting your money. It's about protecting your mind. That's true in casinos. And it's absolutely true in life. We love to chase things. Jobs. Goals. Approval. Likes. A perfect version of ourselves that probably doesn't exist. And sometimes that drive is great. But sometimes it's a slot machine. And you've already spent more than it's worth. Knowing when to stop. When to take a breath. When to say, this doesn't serve me anymore. That's power. It's the moment you take the math, the probabilities, the logic, the data, and combine it with something even more rare. Wisdom. Because math is about numbers. But life is about timing. And walking away at the right moment, that's a skill that takes a lifetime to learn. You don't need to win every hand. You don't need to be the smartest player in the room. You just need to know your limits. And trust yourself enough to say, that's enough for today. Let the house win sometimes. Let the cards fall. And walk out with your head high. Not because you beat the system, but because you didn't let the system beat you. That's real victory. Now, if this all sounds a little serious, don't worry. There's humor in it too. Because let's be honest, most of us don't walk away because of some deep personal epiphany. We walk away because our feet hurt, because we ran out of cash, because the guy next to us started singing Bon Jovi into his cocktail glass. But hey, the reason doesn't matter. What matters is, you left. And sometimes in a world that's constantly telling you to do more, chase more, risk more, leaving is the boldest move you can make. So if you ever find yourself sitting at life's metaphorical blackjack table, wondering whether to double down or call it a night, take a breath. Think about the odds. Think about your energy. Think about whether staying is a choice or a habit. And then, if you're ready, stand up, cash out, and walk away knowing the real trick wasn't beating the game. It was knowing how to stop playing. And that, my friend, is mathematics with a side of peace. Now before we go, let's end this night with the quiet question we started with. Can you beat the casino? Sometimes. If you're clever, careful, calm, but the bigger truth, you don't have to, because you're already holding the most powerful advantage in the room, awareness, and maybe a really solid understanding of expected value, and maybe a snack in your bag. That helps too. Coming up next, nothing. You've reached the end of the story. So close your eyes. Let the roulette wheels spin in your dreams. Count imaginary cards under a blanket. Picture yourself in a tuxedo or a velvet gown, walking out of the casino with a grin and exactly $1 more than you walked in with. You won, because you understood the game. And more importantly, you knew when to walk away.